You're listening to the KNX Money Hour. With Frank Motek, I'm Charles Feldman.
I'm here to admit that I am, in fact, HIV positive.
Charlie Sheen's acknowledgement on the NBC Today show today that he has HIV could put him in a lot of legal liability. With us now, attorney Anahita Sedaghatfar is of counsel with the Cochran Law Firm here in Los Angeles. Anahita, great to have you with us. Give us your reaction to what Charlie Sheen announced today.
Well, thank you for having me, Frank. Certainly this whole situation is sad, but it's not really surprising. And he faces a ton of legal exposure at this point because you can be sued civilly, which is for monetary damages, if you know, or even if you should have known, that you have HIV or any STD for that matter, and you transmit it to somebody else. And the law, at least here in California, it goes even further, and it says that you can be sued for merely exposing somebody to HIV, even if you don't transmit it to that person. So simply having sex with somebody, knowing that transmission of HIV is possible, is enough for a civil lawsuit.
So if I understand what you're saying correctly, in California, one wouldn't have to necessarily have contracted HIV or proven that they've gotten HIV through Charlie Sheen. The mere fact if they had sex with him, they can sue him because of that.
Absolutely. So here in California and various other states, you don't have to prove that you actually contracted HIV. The mere fact that this individual that was infected had sexual relations with you without telling you beforehand that he was infected with HIV is enough to file a civil lawsuit for damages, because the argument there is that, the person suffered from emotional distress, from anxiety. Just the mere fact that you were exposed to a potentially deadly disease is actionable. And, it doesn't even end there. You have possible criminal liability as well. So, it can be, in California, it's considered a misdemeanor to expose somebody to HIV, and to be criminally charged as a felony, you would have to prove a little bit more. You would have to prove that the individual who was infected, he had a specific intent to give you the disease, and that's very hard to prove. But like I said, here in California, that is a felony. You can face up to 8 years in prison for that. And so far, some of the reports are indicating that Charlie Sheen is being investigated criminally to determine whether or not he can be criminally charged.
Have we seen many cases like that where someone is prosecuted with that felony charge here in California?
It's very rare, Frank. It's very rare that you see that, but the way the law is written, they're essentially viewing HIV sort of as a weapon. So they're comparing it to the same way as if you were walking down the street and somebody put a gun to your head. So they take it very seriously. And we know, Charlie gave, his statement today. He's admitted that he's already been sued by several of these women, that he's paid out some monetary settlements to them. And I can tell you, with this huge announcement that he made, we are going to see a floodgate of litigation, because all these women that, he's had sex with, and he's admittedly had sex with over 5,000 women, they're going to come out and they are going to be filing claims, lawsuits against him, and he's going to have to pay a lot of money to settle these cases.
Okay, so let's say, just for the sake of argument, that Charlie Sheen walked into your law practice tomorrow morning and said, "Please represent me." What advice would you give him?
Well, first, I would gladly represent him. I believe everyone has a defense, whether it's a civil case or a criminal case. But my suggestion to him would be basically to try to resolve these claims. It's just not financially, plausible to try to go ahead and defend against what I predict will be, a myriad of lawsuits brought by many, many women. I think from a legal standpoint, just as a business decision, it would cost him, in the millions to try to defend against these cases. And then also you have to think of it from a PR perspective. I don't think it's going to look very good for him on a PR level to litigate these cases. Then you're forced to sit for depositions. You're forced to, sit through discovery, provide documents, and all of his private business will be aired for the world to see. So I think my advice to him would be, let's sit down, let's come up with a plan, let's, respond to these women, and let's see what we can do to try to, make these cases quietly go away.
And on the flip side, if you were to represent someone who is on the other side of this equation, what would your advice be there?
Well, my advice would be, the law is in your favor. At least here in California, if the sexual relations took place here, the law is clear, and they certainly have claims, and I would want to know, what type of emotional distress they sustained. Just, the mere fact of knowing that you had sex possibly multiple times with someone who was infected with HIV. He knew that he was infected. I mean, what type of mental state are you in? I can only imagine that you would be distraught. I can only imagine you would have a ton of anxiety. So that's the way I would represent some of the women.
All right, Anahita Sedaghatfar of the Cochran Law Firm here in Los Angeles. Anahita, appreciate you joining us here today.